Yeah, do we want to take this, or do you want to ask? Do we want to take this question first? Repeat the question. Repeat the question. All right, well, I'm going to repeat the question. Monitoring by the government can be a tool of repression, and the assurance is necessary to ensure that the government is not doing, I assume that's the question, is not doing that. Well, let me tell you, I've been working WMD for 10 years. 10 years. I've been working North Korea, I've been working a lot of other issues. I've been working a lot of other issues if it relates to weapons of mass destruction. I can tell you this, if you want to get to what we've been talking about, the Snowden disclosures and so forth, my exposure to that is what you've been exposed to, is that those programs were authorized by the three branches of government. The three branches of government provided oversight of those programs, and those programs were established post 9/11, when we saw the devastation of 9/11, and when we saw where the terrorists were coming and what their intent was. So you have the three branches of government authorizing it, you have the three branches of government overseeing it. That's what it was, and they've been effective according to the record. The fact of the matter is, a decision has been made to make this more overt and more of a discussion. I don't pretend to be an expert, I have the knowledge you have, but I think you have to have an open mind. If there is a discussion, participate in that discussion in a meaningful way. Listen to let me finish my statement. Do it in a meaningful way. Listen to both sides of it. Listen to what the threat is. Listen to what they're doing. Because everything I've heard, they're not getting into anyone's mail. They're not reading anything. They're not touching any U.S. person. This is not directed at U.S. persons, not U.S. citizens. This is looking at foreign terrorist threats to the country. So look at the facts and then draw your own conclusions, but there will be a discussion on that. Well, I guess I read the same media. You have access to the media. The media said that's going to be more of a discussion. No, what I'm talking about, the question is putting up firewalls. When I say putting up firewalls, how do we protect, because the internet has no borders. It's global. How do companies protect their intellectual property? How do governments protect their critical infrastructure? Putting up firewalls, looking at securing networks, doing what's necessary to ensure that we are protecting our intellectual property, we are protecting our critical infrastructure. No, it's not. You misunderstood. I'm not talking about nation state. I'm talking about international organizations. I mentioned the IAEA. That's an international organization. I mentioned the NPT. That's an international organization. That's what I'm talking about. Creating organizations that oversee this, because this is a global issue. It's not a nation issue. It's not a country-specific issue. This is a global and international issue. Creating these international organizations that will do exactly that, because of the concerns you have, and there's a valid concerns. Both of your questions are very valid. Sir. Thanks.
My biggest problem right now is that technology is moving so much faster than policy. Policy is being dictated by old white men in Washington that have no dog in this hunt. Therefore, their vote is up for grabs for whatever special interest group is going to be the highest bidder. So you have these people like Aaron Schwartz who are hounded and persecuted for something that is, in the grand scope of things, in terms of nuclear proliferation, things like that, are virtually meaningless in comparison, and they're hounded until something horrible happens, like they end their own life because of the jail time they're facing. And that's the problem I have, is that we have all these people that are making policy that don't understand the policies that they're dictating and the outreach that they have.
That's a very good. The question from the gentleman is the policy that's being made by individuals don't really understand the impact and their consequences for making that policy, and indeed inhibiting and possibly persecuting individuals who want to move forward on that. Let me just say, that's why you all can make a difference. You have the expertise, and you're not all old white men. Look around. You can make the difference. You can get involved. You've got to, you can have that impact. Now, you can have that impact also with your representatives. Because this is a representative government, right? It's a republic. Make your impact with your representatives and also get involved in the issues. I can't emphasize that enough.
Okay. Guys, we have a microphone now that we can use for Q&A. So if you could form a line over here.
Sure.
A lot of people that are in the security research division, when they uncover some sort of security law, right now they have to watch their backs, because even if they're doing it with altruistic intentions, they can still be prosecuted by a private company or
We're not on a cable news show. I appreciate
Okay,
you saying
can I ask a favor of you? If you would be kind enough, sir, to come up and use the mic. I think the lady is absolutely right, so everybody can hear it.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I appreciate your response. The only thing I was going to say was that in the security research division that we have right now, the way things are right now, if someone uncovers a security flaw, they have to watch for government prosecution for being sued by Cisco or some other company, because they're uncovering a flaw and they're making public knowledge of a security issue. And it's not really in their best interest to, like you said, to participate in that theater, because they're basically opening themselves up to attack.
Yeah, look, the only thing I can say in that, and I don't pretend to be an expert, this is really, cyber domain is not my area, but my sense of working issues that's somewhat related, because I see cyber as being potentially a weapon of mass destruction when you look at the consequences and the need to sort of get hold on in a global sense. In a global sense, that's why I cite the IEA, I cite the NPT. This is something that we have to come together on, and we have to do it quickly. Further to your question, that's exactly it. I mean, so that when individuals find fault, they look at networks and they look at, they shouldn't be intimidated by that. They should be rewarded for doing that, to protect intellectual properties, to protect infrastructure and so forth. That's all positive. So I think what you say makes sense, and I think working as a, not as necessarily as a team, but certainly as a team, but galvanizing that, and look at what you have here at DEF CON. Yesterday you had Black Hat. That whole cyber issue has a lot of traction. This is the time to come together on that, working with representatives, getting involved with, let me just say, and I know this sounds trite, but getting jobs with the private sector, many of you are doing, getting jobs with the government, many of you are doing, getting very much involved so you become the new culture. And it's not just, as you described, those old white men that are making these decisions and so forth. You become, and you move us in this new domain, which has significant consequences. So I think your questions are very good. Thank you.
So I'm not really sure why you're here, because you said you're not an expert on anything. You used
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I'm not really sure why you're here, but since you are here and talking about weapons of mass
I'm here
destruction.
because, excuse me. I'm here because I'm invited.
Okay.
That makes sense. Don't you
Sure.
understand that? Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
the point being, we just spent 10 years killing 100,000 people in Iraq for weapons of mass destruction, which appears to be your expertise. And I'd like your comments on the lies that got us into that, where people like you came out with the propaganda that there were weapons of mass destruction everywhere, that they were imminent to be used, that they weren't there, and that all of that government propaganda was lies. And why shouldn't we consider that what you're saying now is lies?
Let me answer your question.
Because I don't think the feds tell the truth.
Let me
answer. Can I answer the feds.
Let me answer your question. You could assume whatever you want. If you want to be blunt, you could assume whatever you want. If you want to, let me finish. You could assume whatever you want, but if you want to be blinded to what's happening, if you want to be blinded to the terrorism threat, if you want to be blinded to, well, you laugh? You're not concerned about terrorism. 9/11 was not a reality?
Was 9/11 caused by weapons of mass destruction?
No. If we want to be blinded, we listen to you.
Why did we go to Iraq and kill all those people? The government told us it was because they had weapons of mass destruction.
I think
we used depleted uranium shells on the city of Fallujah. and have a 50% death rate of the bursts and a 30%.
Sir, let me just say something. In my presentation this morning, I was not talking about Iraq.
But that's what we want to talk about.
But
Okay, that's fine. You want to talk about
Weapons
it.
of mass destruction.
The fact of the matter is, and I'm not going back to the history on this either, because I think the record is very clear that Saddam did not have weapons at that time, and I think the government has said that very clearly. The fact is, when you go back to the first Gulf War, when you go back to what Saddam was doing, when you go back to his plans, when you go back to some of the scientists who were working on it, Saddam was pursuing it years before that. At the moment, at that time, no, and I think the record is clear on that. But the fact of the matter is, that should not blur you to the fact of what's going on in Syria with chemical weapons. That should not blur you to the fact that if Iran goes forward with nuclear weapons and North Korea retains those nuclear weapons, it shouldn't blind you to the fact that terrorist organizations are trying to get their hands on this material. That's a reality.
And the reality that the government is lying about those things.
Well, if you want to believe
the terrorists may be there, the threat may be there, but the government is lying.
You could believe what
covering it
you
up.
could believe what you want, but I can tell you this: you have a lot of dedicated Americans working these issues who care about the safety of American people, care about the safety of you and all of us in this room here, and spend time doing that because we know what the threat is, and we're trying to communicate that. Now, if you don't want to hear that, if you don't want to be oblivious to it, that's your business. But there are a lot of people putting their lives on the line to protect all of us in this room.
No, that's not what they're doing. Let's
move on. Okay.
Thank you for being here. I think this is a question you don't need to answer, but who participated in creating the speech?
I'm sorry?
Who participated in creating the speech?
What speech?
Like the one you just gave.
I did.
Only you?
Only me.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned Iran at the beginning of your speech. You said that they were months away from creating a nuclear weapon. Considering that we've been hearing that for the last 30 years, most particularly in the last 8 years, and it hasn't happened, why should we believe you now when you've been so wrong in the past?
Sir, let me ask all of you to do something. And I know you're all very smart people, and you really have cyber, and you search the internet. Go on to the Board of Governors report, the Director General of the IAEA, Amano. Every 3 months he does a report to the Board of Directors. Go to the May 22nd, 2013 report and see what the IAEA, independent organization, says about Iran's program, about the 17,000 centrifuges, about the sophistication up to the IR-4 centrifuges, about 180, now it's 190 kilograms of uranium enriched to 20% purity. And we know the red line being 250, and we know to go from 190 to 250. Of the 6 tons of uranium enriched to 5% purity. We're talking about 5 to 6 weapons. Talk about what the IAEA, it's not what I'm saying, it's not what the US government's saying, it's what the intelligence, it's what the IAEA is saying. Read that report and the ones that preceded it, and the new one is coming out in a few weeks, and then draw your own conclusions.
We have all these reports going back years and years and years. Every year it's a scary report about Iran.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Every year there's a scary report about Iran developing nuclear weapons, and they've never developed nuclear weapons.
We're not talking about them developing. We're saying they have the capability, and they're at a tipping point. And if they make a decision, Khomeini makes a decision, they could do that. They could do that within months. Hopefully they don't make that decision. Hopefully that isn't, because it will open up, some suspect, I assess as a person, that would open up an arms race in the Middle East. Because I don't think countries are going to sit there. When you look at the Sunni Shia aspect to it there, when you look at Iran's support to Hezbollah, when you look at what's going on in Syria, I think that would be a concern. And let me put it very bluntly. If you're sitting in Israel, Iran with nuclear weapons is indeed an existential threat. So you've got a lot of factors there that you're considering.
I'm sure for the Iranians, Israel in possession of nuclear weapons is a far greater